My name is He Yong in Chinese and Yang Ho in English. I'm the co-chair of the Renwen Society at the China Institute. And the other co-chair is Mr. Ban Wang, who I'll be introducing to you in a few minutes. If you have not heard of Renwen, the word Renwen in Chinese simply means humanities, liberal arts, literature, culture, and art. And this is what we do, and this is what we do the best in the city, maybe in the country as well. We regularly organize lectures, symposiums, and other events having to do with all aspects of Chinese culture. Since our founding 11 years ago, we have organized close to 400 lectures and symposiums. Most of our events are conducted in Chinese, and from time to time, we do have our events in English. And the symposium today is one in which we'll be doing in English. Just for a change. Yeah. The Renwen Society is a part of China Institute. If you have not heard of China Institute, it is the oldest cultural institution in the U.S. having to do with China. And the China Institute was founded 88 years ago. So this is a very auspicious number. So this year, China Institute is celebrating its founding, its 80th anniversary. China Institute was founded by 4 scholars, all of them from Columbia University. So of the 4 pioneers, 2 of them were Chinese and 2 of them were Americans. The 2 Chinese were Dr. Guo Bingwen. Guo Bingwen happened to be the son-in-law of our main character today,夏瑞芳. And this happens to be the 100th anniversary of Guo Bingwen receiving a PhD from Columbia University as the first Chinese ever receiving a PhD from Columbia. So in 2 weeks, there will be another event commemorating the occasion. And the other Chinese was a familiar one. That was Dr. Hu Shi. The 2 Americans, one of them was Professor Jiang Dui, and the other one was Paul Monroe. So, I myself, I'm a graduate of Columbia University, and my co-chair, Mr. Ban Wang, once taught at Columbia University for many years. So we are all Columbian in a sense, yeah. So whenever we have our events at Columbia, it was a homecoming for us. So now let me first thank the CV Star East Asian Library, and particularly its director, Mr. Jim Chen, for co-hosting this event with us. So we really appreciate all the assistance and the support for making this event happen. So if you feel that this room is grand, is spacious, and is comfortable, and we owe our thanks to the Asian Pacific Development Society. So that is a group, that is a society formed by Chinese students at Columbia. So we have an assistant sitting around. So let's please join me in giving them a round. So we are gathered here today for a singular purpose. And the singular purpose is to commemorate and celebrate the life of a great pioneer, Mr.夏瑞芳. So with his unique diligence and vision, he created a modern Chinese publishing industry that has enlightened generations of Chinese from the end of the 19th century up until this very day. So, we from China and in China, we owe our education, our intellect to Mr.夏瑞芳and also to the commercial press. So this is the 100th year anniversary of his passing. Yeah, so this is supposed to be a sad day, but we celebrate his life and achievements. We have a great lineup of speakers, and who are all leaders and authorities in the field of publishing and library science. As you can see from the print program, right? So the proceedings of this symposium will be presided over by two great scholars, and one of them is Mr. Jim Cheng of the C.V. Star East Asian Library of Columbia University, and the other co-chair of the symposium is Mr. Ben Wang. Yeah. So 9 of them need an introduction, but I'll give a brief introduction to you anyway. Yeah. Now let me start with Mr. Cheng. Yeah. Mr. Cheng is a Shanghai native, as is Mr. Ben Wang. So this is a Shanghai gathering. Yeah. I believe that Mr. Henry Wang originally, maybe from your name, we know that you're from Shanghai, and maybe your ancestry is from Shanghai as well. Right. Yeah. So Mr. Cheng received his BA from the prestigious Fudan University in Shanghai, China, and he received his master's in comparative literature and library and information science from the University of Washington in Seattle. So he worked at many libraries and universities in the United States. So in March this year, Mr. Chen was elected Vice President and President-elect of Council on East Asian Libraries. So he's the czar or head of all the East Asian libraries in the US. So due to his distinguished and innovative contribution to the library collection of East Asian films, holding film festivals and symposiums on East Asian films, Mr. Chen was named one of the 2008 movers and shakers by the US Library Journal. So he's one of the movers and shakers of our event today. Yeah. Now let me move on to introducing Mr. Ben Wang. So while serving as the co-chair of the Renwen Society, Mr. Wang is also a senior lecturer at the United Nations and the China Institute. So many of the people in the audience are actually Mr. Wang's favorite students, yeah, from both institutions. And Mr. Ben Wang is, as we all know, is steeped in literature, both classical and modern, art, calligraphy, poetry, theater, and you name it. Besides all this, Mr. Wang is also a great translator, and he's an award-winning translator. I think his translation of the Chinese operas is unparalleled, yeah, not only in the US, but also in the world. Yeah. So our symposium today is in two capable hands. So now please join me in welcoming Mr. Jim Chen to chair the next leg of this symposium.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everyone for coming on this rainy days. And also, I would like to thank Dr. He Yong. I'm very humbled by your nice words, because especially, I'm facing two most senior, respected Chinese librarians, American librarians in front of me, and I'm very humbled. Thank you. And Dr. He Yong, I consider you as the big, powerful engine of this event. And without you, this event as CARP will not move forward. And we won't sit here today to mark the 100 years of Ho Zhou Fang's passing, as well as celebrate the launch of the Ho Zhou Fang's biography, A Pioneer Remembered, by C.M. Zhao, and the translated into Chinese by Ben Wang and Yuan Xiaoning. My deep thanks to all these writers and translators. And also, I would like to thank the Henry Wang from Taiwan. And you definitely follow the footprints of the Ho Zhou Fang and continue this great adventure, great joint venture in both sides. My understanding, both Taiwan and China, and the commercial press is still big identities there. thank you. And also thank you from so far away, bring some gift to the Columbia University libraries. We appreciate it. And I'm thanking you for the Columbia users. Retrospectively, when I was reading the biography of the Hozhou Fang, because I'm from Shanghai, so I know why it's Ho. Because Shanghainese they call Xia or so Ho Fang, Shanghai so Ho. And what impressed me and inspired me most, besides the fact of Mr. Ho is one of the founders of the first modern Chinese commercial press in China, established in 1897 until his assassination in 1914. The commercial press had already developed into a big modern press with 2 branch offices and a list of distributors, and the annual sale passed $2 million US. But very interesting thing to me is why there are not that much commemorative activities in both mainland and China. And especially considering commercial press still a big major publishing entities in both sides. This question was raised in the preface of English version. However, it's not in the Chinese version. And the answer, it's in the book, is because they say, because our translator and the authors say this is because Mr. Ho is not leaning to either communist or nationalist parties. And he is, in a way, is a pure businessman. So I think this is a very interesting thing. I will hope more people will do more digging, find out more reasons. And so this is an interesting point for me to see it. And the second thing to me very interesting is especially inside mainland China, just recently, the Chinese Academic Society started to give more credits to the American missionary contribution to the modernizing China's education, healthcare, and the social welfare system. And by reading the biography, you will realize both Mr. Ho and all 3 partners all has a very strong American missionary education background. And nowadays, especially from mainland China, it's no longer called the American missionaries, called spiritual opium for the people. The running dog, was of the imperialism. They stop talking that. However, I think this is the area we still don't have enough scholarship, and want people pay more attention to this background. And it's not the special American missionary. They did so many things in China, and they are even different to me compared to our European missionaries. So this is the area I hope people will do more research on the subjects. And especially in the Columbia, we have a very big book library at the Union Theological Cemetery. There are rich archival collections about the Chinese missionary activities in China, especially Presbyterian church activities, including the Jingling Women's College complete archive collected and donated to the Columbia by its founder, Mrs. Thornton, which include like 16 boxes. I looked through the archive, I was really impressed. They have included all the college papers from the beginning to the end, like 1905 to 1952, I believe that. So this is interesting, the point for me to think about it. And lastly, certainly not less importantly, I'm deeply grateful to Julian Su, and who is the grandson of the Hozhou Fang, and the original supporter of the biography and the critical, to me, he's the critical gasoline of this event. If Dr. Po Yong is the engine, Ms. Julian is the engine, gasoline. You put a lot of gasoline there, pushing the whole thing moving. So, my brief talking just ended right here now. And then I will want to introduce one of our most senior Chinese American librarians, Dr. Ji Wang. And Dr. Ji Wang now is the co-chair of the U.S.-China Policy Foundation and the professor of U.S.-China Relations and Modern China at the Georgetown University. And he was the head of the Chinese section at the Library of Congress and had worked there for more than 48 years before retiring from LCs in October 2004. And Dr. Wang received his PhD from the Georgetown University in 1969. And he has been a professor there in history since then. He is the pioneer of open exchange between US and China. And if he's not only one, I think he's very few Chinese American libraries I can see have a special Wikipedia page. And I think that's a special honor. Let's welcome Dr. Ji Wang.
Thank you, Dr. Chen, and I want to thank all the sponsors and hosts, and particularly the German Society of China Institute, and also CB Star Library, East Asian Library at Columbia University, and other friends. And I'm honored to be here today. Personally, I know maybe most of you I have never met before, but I've been involved with Columbia since 1960. I used to come here every month to have a lunch with the East Asian Institute people at Columbia. At that time was Carrington Goodrich and Theodore DeBerry, and later on John Lindbeck, and later on Doug Barnett, and also their student Michael Oxenberg. These are the people who used to be here at Columbia. And I was at Georgetown as a student, also worked for Library of Congress and during daytime. Now, let me cut down my self-introduction. Just to let you know, today I'm really honored to be here today, because as a librarian for 50 years, you cannot get away the name Commercial Press. Once I was invited by Dr. Ho and the East Asian Library here, I said, I have to go. Even though I have difficulty to walk, I said I can try to come here today. So I made it, okay? And I worked for Library of Congress for 48 years, and plus I worked for Hong Kong Chinese University for 4 years. And I also very close associated with the library in Hong Kong, library in Taipei, library in Beijing. I've been a librarian almost 50 years, so I know almost everybody until 10 years ago. But I'm still, after I retired, I still can't get away with libraries. So if you work with any library for 50 years, you just cannot forget about libraries. And plus, I like books. I still buying books. I still read books. I'm still writing books. I published a new book will be coming out next year in UK about the US-China relations. Now, come back to commercial press. When I look at the name commercial press, when I was a child, I studied first grade at Nanjing Shanxi Road Elementary School, which is in the heart of Nanjing City. My father worked for the nationalist government, and he died in 1960 in Beijing. I also used many textbooks as a child, published by commercial press. I also learned how to use four-corner system dictionaries invented by Wang Yunwu. Now, since Dr. Chen already mentioned briefly about the history of commercial press, I don't want to go into Mr.夏瑞芳's contribution. I think he was the only person in the Chinese history, modern history. He is a legend. Nobody, I think I'm glad today Columbia and China Institute would commemorate his death 400 years ago. But his legacy, I don't know how to measure. No way to measure his legacy, because he not only founded the Communist Press in 1897, but he also recruited a number of partners. Most of them become very well known in Chinese history. Let me give you one example. First one, 张元济. I'm sure many people know Wang Zhang Yanji. Zhang was a Qin in 1862, and he became advisor to Emperor Shunfu before the 100-day reform, and Liang Qichao and Cai Yuanpei, and these are all recruited by Mr. Xia Ruifang himself. Zhang Yanji was a teacher, principal of Nanyang Academy in Shanghai. Nanyang Academy later on became Jiao Tong University in Shanghai. Because of Xia Ruifang's vision and mission and goal, he wanted to develop a modern China's printing industry and publishing industry. Zhang Yanji was only one example. Later on, Mr. Wang Yingwu also joined the Communist Press in the 1920s. In fact, I just mentioned to Mr. Henry Wang Yingwu visited the Library of Congress in 1935. I have his signed guest book here. So I have a lot of opportunity to meet people related to Wang Yingwu. Of course, I never met Zhang Yanji. Zhang Yanji was born in 1862, died in 1959. He stayed in China, became a member of the National People's Congress, the first member, the oldest member in 1954. But Wang Yingwu went to Taiwan. Wang Yingwu was the first the Minister of Finance for national government, and then became Vice Premier in Taiwan. They all very successful in career, but they also contribute so huge in publishing. Without these three people, Xia Ruifang, Zhang Yanji, Wang Yingwu, I don't know what happened. Do you know? Commercial Press is the longest Chinese publisher in China today. Last more than 100 years. How many of you know? How about American publisher? Which one has the longest history? American publisher. Here, everybody here, most Americans, Chinese Americans. Which one? You know? Thailand, you know? The first publication printed by Scientific American, 1845. It's still published today. But it was later on took over by Macmillan Press. The commercial trade publisher, Harry Holt. This still existed, but in China, only one modern publisher still existing, the Commercial Press. Not only existing, also existing in China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. In fact, I was very proud of myself. My book, my memoir, was published by Commercial Press in Hong Kong, 2009. This is my memoir published by Commercial Press in Hong Kong. Okay? So I'm just wanted to bring here to show you how important Commercial Press is. Not because it published my book, but the important impact on Chinese culture, history, education, culture, and civilization. Commercial Press, when Mr. Xia Ruifang started, more than 100 years ago, he wanted to introduce a modern education. A lot of people joined him, later on become reformers. He participated in the 100-day reform, 1898. Of course, it failed. And Cai Yuanpei, Han Youwei, this all belong to work for Commercial Press. Now, also, they published the first textbook magazine by Commercial Press. For example, I'm sure, Eastern Miscellany, 东方杂志, published since 1904, and still published today in Taiwan. Also, they published 儿童杂志, 教育杂志, Mr. Xia Ruifang, that was in the early 20th century. Almost every subject he published a magazine. 小说杂志, 文学杂志, literature magazine. Zhang Wenji was also an editor for Chinese first diplomat magazine in Shanghai. So everything from politics to culture, education, and society. Also, 女人杂志 Women magazine. In Beida, we have a 新青年 New Youth. That's published by Beida, not by Communist Press. Communist Press has more influence, impact on Chinese society. Even today, doesn't matter whether it's mainland China, Communist Press, Taiwan, and still one of the most important publishing house in China. Besides Communist Press, what other Chinese publishers are still around today since 1920s? You know? We all know 开明书店, right? We also know 世界书局. We also know 中华书局. 中华 was Communist Press was private. A private enterprise started by a very humble origin, Mrs.夏瑞芳. This is what I don't think in the world, any other country, have a publisher like Mrs.夏瑞芳. And I understand he is related to Mr. Guo Bingwen, a friend of mine in one district. He was the first university president of Dongnan University. This is all very, the whole family have involved so many capable talents in culture and history and writing and publishing. So I wanted to say also one thing I remember about Communist Press in Taiwan. In 1981, I'm sure many people here knows Mr. Chen Lifu, the party boss of Kuomintang, Chen brothers, Chen Guofu, Chen Lifu. Chen Lifu retired from the U.S. and went back to Taipei. He started learning classics. Oh, another thing I should mention. In 1910s, Mr.夏瑞芳and Zhang Wenji together to start reprint Chinese classics. That's important. The Chinese real books, Chinese classics, you cannot read that in library. You have to read wherever you have to borrow the real book. They reprinted real books the first time ever in China in 1920s. But what I'm trying to say is, by 1981, Chen Lifu, he wanted to print a large set of Chinese classics. He said, can you come to Taipei to see me? He invited me to a dinner at Freedom House, 自由之家. I said, Mr. What do you want from me? He said, I want nothing, I'll give you a dinner. And he said, do you want to support me? I said, I support you. You should support me. And I said, what do you want to support? He said, I'm planning to print an entire set for 四库全书. I said, are you serious? I'm serious. I got permission. The whole collection now in Taipei College Museum Library. And some involve thousands of volumes. Cost $1 million. Because that's what I wanted to help you. And how can I help? I can afford to buy a set. He said, can you ask Library Congress to buy a set? If Library Congress agrees to buy a set, then we can go ahead and ask the Taipei government to sponsor printing by Communist Press. I said, I'm as a head of Chinese segment, I'm only allowed to authorize buy up to $5,000. Now $10,000, I can have to ask the Librarian Congress. So I went back to the Library Congress. I asked Dr. Daniel Borstein, the Librarian Congress, from 1975 to 1987. I just happened to good relation with my boss, Dr. Borstein. Dr. Borstein was one of the well-known American history experts. And he was, at that time, he was writing a book called Discovery. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner 3 times. He said, Mr. Wang, I'm writing a new book, Discovery. Can you tell me about who invented printing, who invented gunpowder, who invented paper making? He was happy. He said, yes, we'll buy a set, $10,000, no problem. So I immediately called Mr. Shen in Taipei. He said, My boss said, yes, you can buy a set. And then he started printing. He wasn't sure they could make money. Only print 50 sets or 四库全书, complete collection of four categories, 四库, including classics, 经史子集, history, philosophy, and better letters. Come out more than 1,500 volumes. That 四库全书 was the start of the project in 1733 by Emperor Chen to collect more than 4,000 titles Chinese classics, put them together, and the best book in China, supposed best in China, reprinted. So by 1983, the new set come out. We ordered one set. The book arrived. 1,500 volumes, so huge, and no space to put them, shovel them. So the technicians complained to me, said, well, how can you buy so many, we have no place to shelf them. I said, put on the floor. Later on, we put on the shelf. This is what Communist Fred did in in 1983. That was another contribution for reading Chinese classics, kind of like encyclopedia of Chinese literature and history and philosophy. I'm sure Dr. Ma, you know that, right? 四库全书. Any librarian, local Chinese library, should know 四库, 4 categories. Now, this is something that I will never forget. I studied commercial press textbooks as a child. As high school, I used full corner system and dictionary. You know what? When I first started my job at Library of Congress back in the 1950s, my boss, Dr. Wu Guangxing, KT Wu, a first Chinese person received a PhD in library science from the University of Chicago, where Dr. Ma got a PhD. And in 1941, he asked me, Guangxi, you know how to use full corners? I said, I don't. You don't? How can you work with Library of Congress? So I'll teach you. I learned full corner system from Dr. KT Wu. He said, you have to know, you want to tell all the books, check reference, you must know how to use four corners. The influence, the impact on library development, education is just so huge. So I wanted to stop here, because I don't want, I'm sure Dr. Ma will tell you some more about community press. And I would stop here. And thank you for listening, and I'm glad to be here today. I have a 30 to us. Give me my written so slow. If you can't, you can go to surgery.
My friends, good afternoon, and I'm very happy to see you. Celebrating great men, we elevate ourselves. So in no humility, in no modesty, I feel very lofty this afternoon, as you can see, because we are celebrating a great man, a great man, a pioneer in his field. Almost single-handedly, he created this brilliant harbinger of the industry of publishing in China. And the publishing company is still going strong, ever stronger, in Beijing, in Taipei, in Hong Kong, and in the hearts and in the minds of all Chinese inside and outside of China. For this, I would call him a great, great man. This man, his name is, you will see, Hao Zoi Fong, and that is the Chinese pronunciation of his name. More than 100 years ago, there was no formal romanization system. So even though Dr. Cheng, he explained a little bit that Ho is the Shanghai dialect sound for Xia. So I want to tell you something about the Shanghai dialect, which I love. And then you will see the conversion. The sound Xia Rui Fang, believe it or not, in Shanghai dialect, it's Bo Zhe Fang. Now, do you see it? Bo Zhe Fang. Bo Zhe Fang. Is it clear? This is. I have this occupational hazard from being a teacher for so long. So everywhere I go, I said, "Do you understand? Do you?" So please bear with me. That's one thing about being old, because whatever you say, however madly you act, people forgive you. So you must bear with me. Now, both Dr. He, my co-chair, and both Dr. He and Dr. Chen, they mentioned our speakers, some of our speakers, and they thanked all the people who have helped us greatly. But I need to say something. I need to introduce two people today in your audience. One is the Vice President of China Institute. Actually, he's new on the boat. I've been on the boat for 30 years. So he's a new brother on the boat. And that is Mr. Tom Moore. He is kindly lending his glamour to our event. Tom. And if you are impressed, which I was and still am, with Dr. Wang's speech, and it brought back so many memories. I still remember when my father took me to see the eminent Wang Yunwu, Master Wang Yunwu. I still remember. So when I came in, when I was introduced to Mr. Henry Wang, I exclaimed, I said, I cannot believe the resemblance between you and your grandfather. He really looks like his grandfather. And I suspect in personality and in the way he works, he leads his people. He's like Master Wang Yunwu. I will get to a little later. And the other person, if you are impressed with Dr. Wang's speech, which I am, I need to tell you, Mrs. Wang, Dr. Ernestine Xie, is my god sister. For being here, I always remember fondly. May I be emotional in this very formal occasion? Again, being so old, I must be suffered. So I feel very emotional. But last time when Dr. Wang came to Renwen to give a talk, Mrs. Wang, she was also here, and I hadn't seen her in God knows how long. I'm not going to tell you my age, okay? Or more than 40 years, I hadn't seen her. So I was elated to see her, and today she's kind enough to be here too. And I really need to tell you, and thank you so much. And I call her Jia Jia, which is Jie Jie in Shanghai dialect. So you see, I feel very dear and warm to Shanghai dialect. So this Bo Zhe Fang is fine with me. But whenever I mention the name of this master, I will say Mr. Xia Rui Fang. Now, in all seriousness, I really think the greatness of Master Xia Rui Fang lies in many aspects. First of all, he emerged from obscurity to reach where he was, at the helm of in his lifetime, the greatest publishing house in China, now one of the greatest. And he rose, he emerged from obscurity, and he was a self-made man. So, if you need to know more about his life, why am I talking here? Buy the book. I'm doing a little sales pitch here. It ain't gonna hurt anybody. Okay? We need the book be read. Don't read my translation. It's a very poor rendering of the original written by this great writer who is in our midst, who will talk to you later. And also, I am so astonished that a man like Master夏瑞芳, back when, toward the end of the corrupt Manchu dynasty, at the dawning days of the Republic, he shared the same belief. He believed in what is in Latin by some Latin scholar who said wisely, verba volant, scripta manent, which means spoken words are breeze, but the written ones, bronze. And I have rendered this saying to much unworthy Chinese, which is 言是风，文如铜. And what did Franklin Roosevelt, our president, once said so wisely? He said, yes, men die, but books don't die. And Master Xia came to realize this. He shared this. So he gave all he had to his endeavor, his dedication, his dream. And his dream came true. And so this man, his dream, whatever he did, will never die. It's ageless, timeless. It's about time that a book was written about him. The reason that his name was almost unknown to Chinese people on both sides of the Taiwan Channel, Taiwan Strait, is because he had no party. He was assassinated I let cat out of the bag. You want to know the detail? You buy the book. So he met with a very tragic ending because he was misunderstood by all the political factions of the day. His only purpose in life was to save China with education, with publications, with books, and he gave all he had. He led a most austere and frugal existence. He gave all he had, money, spirit, heart, and love, to what he believed in, which is his publishing company. For that, I bow to him. I feel very lofty because we are celebrating a great man. So, without further ado, my job, my co-chair is staring at me. Hello, your job is to introduce our next prominent, eminent scholar. What are you doing there? I'm sorry. I just get carried away, when I get emotional and carried away when I'm dealing with these very grand subjects. I think these are grand matters. What do you think? That wasn't so hard, was it? Now, all jokes aside, I'm going to introduce our next most prominent speaker. Mr. Henry C. Wong is managing partner of CFO Incorporated, an accounting and financial service company in California. Mr. Wong worked with the Inspector General's Office of the United States Department of Labor, as well as many other public and private sectors. Mr. Wong served as treasurer and board member of Wang Yunwu Foundations in both Taiwan and the United States. Now, although Dr. Wang already introduced to you Master Wang Yunwu, but I feel I must add a few more words. Now, Master Wang Yunwu is the grandfather of Mr. Henry Wang. Wang Yunwu was a true legend and a household name in China. An extraordinarily versatile thinker, man of letters, educator, publisher, calligrapher, and statesman. He served as general manager and later chairman of the board of the commercial press, among countless other distinctive positions. Incidentally, the master invented a unique Chinese dictionary, which is called 四角字典, 四角号码, dictionary by the four corners of a character. He invented it, which is known and popular to all Chinese to this day. And that is how important, how grand the master, the grandfather of Mr. Henry Wang was, how prominent. The Wang Yunwu Foundations, expertly served by Mr. Henry Wang, promote educational development and provide resources for the underprivileged and have set up 18 public libraries in rural areas of China and Taiwan, and have so far created 22 university-level scholarships and given graduate-level research grants in China, Taiwan, and the United States. Mr. Henry Wang, now he serves as chairman of board, chairman of Taiwan Commercial Press. There's no doubt, we should have no doubt whatsoever that at the helm of Mr. Henry Wang, the commercial press will press forward and flourish evermore in the future. Now, without further ado, I give you Mr. Henry Wang.
Thank you, Ben. That's a tall order. Big shoes to fill. I'll try. Dr. Chen, honored guest, Professor Wang, Junior, representing Taiwan Commercial Press, I'm honored to participate in this symposium. For our founder, Mr.夏瑞芳, the pioneer of modern Chinese publishing, I'm especially happy to be here because my mother used to be a researcher in the medical center at the Presbyterian Hospital here in the 1950s. So do I kind of count as part Colombian? Or get adopted somehow? Anyway, I think my mother is very pleased I'm here today and smiling on me. Hi, Mom. Being a Christian, I think Mr.夏瑞芳is here in this room with us today, smiling at us. I'm also very excited because our family tie with commercial press, but also the opportunity for commercial press to publish the book of his biography and introduce to the world how Mr.夏瑞芳had founded one of the most prominent and important publishing houses in publishing Chinese literature, Chinese history and philosophy books. 中华数据 may not agree with us. Anybody from 中华数据? No? Okay. But 中华数据 is a commercial press spin-off.
couple renegade editors decided to start it on. They do very good work. Taiwan Commercial Press still work very closely with Beijing Zhonghua Suju. We are able to maintain the current status. Personally, I attribute because the foundation has been built by Mr.夏瑞芳that set us with the mission envisioned by the very first CEO of the China's modern industry. During the turbulent periods 117 years ago, right after losing the Sino-Japan War, the political atmosphere is full of uncertainty, and the Chinese society is longing for improvement. Charles Dickens has described this condition best as he wrote in his novel, *The Two Cities*. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was also the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it's also the winter of despair. He had everything before us, and we have everything or nothing before us. We're all going directly to heaven. We're all going directly to heaven. That was the time. In such a challenging time, during the spring of 1897, the 20-something, full of hope and ambitions for the future, Mr.夏瑞芳bravely launched Commercial Press with 3 close friends, 包贤师、包贤昌跟高凤池, classmates from Glory School. It's a Presbyterian school. Commercial Press was originally to be just a printing company, but under Mr.夏瑞芳's leadership, his determination, applying the newest printing techniques, delivering knowledge-based contents to our readership, Commercial Press evolved to be a prominent and important publishing house, and at the time, it was the 3rd largest in the world. And also by following Mr.夏瑞芳's visions, his wise leadership, Commercial Press was instrumental in assisting developing the public education systems in China. During the past 117 years, we endured political uncertainty and the destruction of war. Our factory and library were bombed in June. But with the determination and the tenacity that we learned from Mr.夏瑞芳, we still published the textbook required for the school to start in September, 3 months later. By taking printing press piece by piece, shipped from Hong Kong and Guangzhou to Shanghai. Beijing, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, we have operated autonomously for the past 60 years. However, we remain working closely like brothers and sisters. We formed Commercial Press International with joint funding from Beijing, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and Taiwan 20 years ago with a special permission from President Deng Xiaoping himself. We are facing new challenges of digital age in digital publishing. It's not just simply converting print to PDF. It's more than delivery of information. Google and Yahoo could do that. We're a publishing house. It's how to introduce interactive, knowledge-based contents. Again, by following Mr.夏瑞芳's visions, where a Commercial Press is working diligently toward the end. And also by following his example of hiring scholastically talented individuals in accomplish that goal. So with God's help, I pledge and then help that I will do my best to take on the challenges, provide viable knowledge-based contents that will enhance our leadership's quality of life. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you. And may the peace of the Lord be with you always. We are happy that I did not bring it with me. We had the post office shipped it both under post to Columbia Library. One of the set is Zihai. It's we are trying to create a set of encyclopedia like the City Transmission. With similar contents with the National Paleontological Museum and also Tungyang Yangyuan.
Thank you. Yeah, personally also I want to thank Commercial Press. When I was a college student in China during the early 80s, and China just started opening up, and I had a dream to come to study in the US. However, my major is Chinese classical literature. So about 2 dictionaries still here with me. One is the English dictionary, big one. Another one is the Chinese English dictionary. So these 2 dictionaries from Commercial Press accompanied me from China. I took 5 TOEFLs and came to the US. I took 3 times GRE. So it's still with me now. So personally, I'm very grateful to Commercial Press. Next, I want to introduce another our famous Chinese American librarians, Dr. Taylor Ma. Dr. Taylor Ma is currently the director of the East Asian Library and the guest collection at Princeton University. And he was the curator of East Asian Library at the University of Chicago, and the Deputy University Librarian and the director of the Feng Ping Shan Library at the University of Hong Kong. And his research papers in many areas, including the Songjiang and the Jinping Mei, have been highly marked by the academic community. And first, also, Dr. He mentioned I was elected as the Vice President and the President-elect of the Council on East Asian Libraries. Dr. Ma was the President of Council on East Asian Libraries in 1997 to 1999, when I started my librarianship in 1996. So first the president I met is Dr. Ma right here. Dr. Ma.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to speak at this August occasion to celebrate the Commercial Press and Mr. Sa. The Commercial Press is the most important Chinese publisher in the modern period. Books and dissertations on its history and influence were written and published in Chinese, Japanese, English, and French. No other publisher has this kind of impact on so many generations of Chinese. My own encounter with the Commercial Press may serve as an example. The majority of the translated works of Lin Shu, Lin Qingnan were published by the Commercial Press, including novels by Charles Dickens, Walter Scott, Henry Rider Haggard, Daniel Defoe, Jonathan Swift, Washington Irving, O. Henry, and Winston Churchill. Most people may not know that Winston Churchill wrote one novel. It's called Savannah, and it was translated by Lin Shu. in 1913, and of course that book was published by Commercial Press in China. I know some of the stories quite well, including David Copperfield, Ivanhoe, and King Solomon's Mine, initially through movies and Chinese radio programs. It was only after I was admitted to the University of Hong Kong and the Chinese department held an exhibition of the translated works of Lin Shu and Arthur Waley that I came across the original translated works of Lin Shu. In that exhibition, 97 titles were exhibited, and they were all published by Commercial Press. Subsequently, I compiled a bibliography of Lin Shu's translation, paying special attention to the identification of the original works. Thanks to Professor Luo Sanlin, my teacher at Hong Kong U's recommendation, my bibliography was accepted for publication in the May 1967 issue of 出版月刊 Publication Monthly by Taiwan Commercial Press. Then in 1985, without notifying me, the Commercial Press in Beijing planned to include my bibliography in a book to a book on Lin Shu, together with 3 essays on Lin Shu by Chen Zhongshu, Jing Zhenduo, and A Ying, to celebrate the 85th anniversary of the Commercial Press. Fortunately, Mr. Hu Doujing of Shanghai saw the news and he notified me. So I was able to send a revised edition, and that was included in that small booklet. So in the last 30 years, that bibliography was basically the standard bibliography of Lin Shu. And all this happened because the publication monthly published my bibliography. By the way, this magazine, the publication monthly, 出版月刊, has a very short history, so most people may not have heard about it. Actually, because of its success, Commercial Press in Taiwan resumed the Dongfang Zhaji, the Eastern Monthly, to replace the 出版月刊. And the editor of the publication monthly at that time was Jian Yaoji, Ambrose King, who later went to the Chinese University of Hong Kong to teach sociology, and was his vice chancellor, the Shaojiang of the Shanghai Zhongwen Daxue. As many people have mentioned just now, the Commercial Press is well known for publishing large, high-quality reprints of classical works, such as the 24th History and the Zibu Chongkan. But the largest undertaking was the reprint of the Zibu Quanshu, as Dr. Wang Ji has just mentioned. Actually, it started in 1934, when the Commercial Press in Shanghai first selected 231 titles and reprinted in a traditional format as stitch bound. Then starting in 1968, Commercial Press in Taiwan first reprinted that series, those 231 titles and previously reprinted, and reprinted 12 more series. So a large part of the Zibu Quanshu was already reprinted by Taiwan Commercial Press. But eventually, in 1983, it decided to reprint the complete set, now kept in the Paris Museum in Taipei. This was a major publication event, and its impact on Chinese study cannot be overstated. And we all know now most people is using the database, and the database is based on the Taiwan reprint edition. So in 1983, while checking the 4th reprint series at the University of Chicago Library, I came across a poem written by the Song of martyr Li Yueshui, criticizing the Song government's policy towards bandits. The first sentence strikes me. It mentioned that Song Zhang and his followers surrounded in the previous year. There have been much debate on whether Song Zhang of Sui Wujuan's fame had surrendered to the Song government. Many scholarly articles were published on both sides of the argument. So my discovery closed the debate. Professor Deng Guangming, the Dean of Song Studies, who did not believe in Song Zhang's surrender, admitted his mistake and explained that he had used an inferior edition. So the publication of the Siku edition by Taiwan Commercial Press conclusively proved that Song Zhang's surrender was a historical fact. I would also like to mention that the famous scholar Chen Zhongshu, in his selection of Song poem, Song Xi Xuan, in his preface, he mentioned that there was no poems written in the Song dynasty concerning the Sui Wujuan story. So these days, whenever some people like to criticize Chen Zhongshu, they mention this fact. They said that Chen Zhongshu did not know that there was this poem by Li Yueshui. But that was really unfair because Chen Zhongshu was unable, did not have the opportunity to use the Siku Quanshu. So all this go back to Taiwan Commercial Press reprinting the Siku Quanshu. So finally, I would like just to take this opportunity to wish the commercial press will continue to flourish and publish good books. And we should never also forget the founders of this great institution. Without the farsightedness of Mr. Sa and his colleagues, there will be no commercial press. He laid down the foundation for the commercial press to grow and flourish. Mr. Sa also has a talent to identify and hire the right people. Zhang Yingji may never have gone to the commercial press if there were no Mr. Sa. Then the history of the commercial press, and indeed that of Chinese publishing history, will have been completely different. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ma. Before I introduce the next person who is most important to this book and the celebration event, I need to say a few words. Today, one person that has been on my mind since I got into this building, and that would be, he was the pièce de résistance of Roman society. Whenever we had something important, I would ask him to come. And he never would say no. And so today, although this is a happy occasion, but it's in my mind is mixed with a slight sense of melancholy. And that person would be Dr. Professor C.T. Xia, who passed away untimely for me. Whatever time he lived a fairly long life in the 90s. But for me, even if you were 190, when if he passed away, it's untimely. So it's forever untimely death of Professor and Dr. Xia, C.T. Xia. Why am I mentioning him? First of all, because this would be his event, and he would be here, he would be giving a speech. It has something to do with a person whom I'm going to introduce next. Because I'm not the only one. In New York, Professor C.T. himself and myself, we adore this writer, who is our next speaker. He's the author of this book. Now, when I translated the book, I spent nights and days thinking about the title in English for this translation. Finally, I decided not to translate what the author had already very wisely and brilliantly chosen and put down. I did Remembrance of a Pioneer. But the original actually is very nice. So here I am going to introduce to you the literal translation from Chinese into English of the original title, just in case there are some people here who do not understand the Chinese language. In the Chinese language, the title of this book is in 4 characters, and they are 典瑞流芳, because the name of Master夏瑞芳, Rui is auspicious or fine, anything that is wonderful and classical. Fang is fragrance, so that's his name. So the 2 characters are aptly placed into the title of the name in Chinese. And Dian is classical. So literal translation would be the classical auspiciousness and refinement will flow on forever in its fragrance. So more literal translation of the original, I think, should be the fragrance of fine books will last forever. And that is the original. And so I just wanted to share, before I introduce the man who came up with the title, who I and the dear, great, grand, late Professor and Dr. C.T. Xia would agree with me. He is the best writer, I should say, anywhere, but let me just say, in New York. Let me put it this way. Without him, I wouldn't even look at World Journal. I'm sorry. I'm sure there might be people. If there's any offense, please forgive my old age and my craziness, my madness. But he's a great writer. Now, I'm going to talk about the next speaker, Mr. Zhao Junmai. Mr. Zhao Junmai is the author of Remembering a Pioneer, biography of the legendary Hao Fang. Now you know where it came from. Need I tell you it's Xia Rui Fang? Need I? Hello? No, good. The master publisher and the founder of the commercial press, whom we are celebrating today. Having served as president of the Chinese Writers Association of New York for 3 unprecedented terms of a total of 6 years, Mr. Zhao Junmai is now the president of the Chinese Writers Association of North America, founder of Collected Literary Works, the bi-monthly literary magazine, and the School of Literary Lectures. Mr. Zhao devoted his presidency to the goal of bringing literature to communities. So do you see Master Xia Rui Fang and this author, Zhao Junmai, brethren they are. A seasoned journalist, a published essayist and novelist, Mr. Zhao Junmai has interviewed countless world-renowned men of letters from both Taiwan and China. His interviews are in the recently published collection of interviews of literary figures. And the great publisher of this great book is, can you guess? Guess what that is? Commercial press, of course. What else? He is the man without whom no words would there be to celebrate and commemorate Master Xia Ruifang. So here is Mr. Zhao Junmai, the author. So, by the way, who has ever heard of Hemingway or E.B. Bright giving a lecture in Chinese? So, no exception. So, I will come to summarize Mr. Zhao Junmai's speech in Chinese. So, for those who don't understand, just be patient. Possess your soul in patience. I'll be back.
即使我说中文，但是我还是用英文先表达一下。It's my honor to be here. I'm very happy to see the subject has inspired such interest in ours here. First, I would like to thank Ben, Yong, and Wayne, and Julian. Without them, the book would not have been possible. At this point, I must ask all of you to allow me to speak in Mandarin. There are two reasons why I must continue in Chinese. The first of all, this book is written and composed in Mandarin Chinese. The second, my native tongue is Chinese. And also, by speaking in Mandarin, I will be able to express my points more fluently. Thank you for understanding. Now I will only use my language in Chinese. Thanks. 各位女士、各位先生，今天这个座谈会，几位作家，对夏瑞芳先生的贡献和这个历史都做了很深刻的讨论。学者专家的这个英文呢，就像在课堂上讲课一样，所以我必须常着，我只能用中文来跟大家表达。现在我上场啊，就不再狗尾续貂，不再谈夏瑞芳先生这个贡献跟他的历史。一开始我就把自己定位，今天我是一个听众而已。但是刚才几位学者似乎没有谈到这本书，所以呢，我就在这里向各位大家分享一下我写这本书的过程的一点小小的心得。夏瑞芳在近代史上是一个非常伟大的人，但是知道的人非常的少，所以我的工作就是将一个了不起的人物从历史尘封的角落里头重新挖掘出来，把他浑身蒙蔽了将近100年的灰土和蜘蛛网一一的清除，还原他本来的面貌，重新把它展现在今人的面前，现代人的面前。这是一个很重要的一个出发点。如果他不伟大，就不需要来写他。他怎么样伟大，没有人知道。所以在这个挖掘的过程里头，我要跟大家分享一下，知道当时怎么样开始做这个事情，然后做这个事情的过程里头，我遇到了一些什么困难。那这个工作呢，最主要是用笔来写成，用文字来表达。那写作必须要有充足的资料，才能够写出它的一个内容，而且它的可读性以及它的一个价值性，必须是从这个主角身上来发挥出来。 问题是夏瑞芳先生留在今天的这资料非常的少，原因我个人认为原因有2，第一个就是他过世的太早，100年前，那么事实上在民国4年的时候，那后来整个商务印书馆的发展，他没有看到，他只是一开始做了一个奠基，因此他过世得很早，后来的人对他不够了解。第二个，他是个实业家，少年受的教育不高，以至于他不能像蔡元培啊、胡适之啊，或者沈从文啊、朱自清啊、徐志摩他们那样留下来很多他们的文章，或者后人对他们有很多的记述，所以他的材料非常的少，不可能随手拈来。那么怎么样来铺陈？我可以做一个比喻，夏瑞芳可用的材料只是一个骨架，而且是残缺破损的骨架。那怎么样在这个骨架上面把它修复完整？完整以后再添上肉，添上血，让它是这个有血有肉、显活的形象重新树立起来。这是写作过程中最大的一个困难。因此呢，我在写作的过程里头，必须要把它是当时的这个时代，还有中国跟外国的这个环境，当时的人物，成为他一个写作的一个辅助的一个题材。刚才几位先生也提到，王兄也提到，像那个张元济、蔡元培几位先生都在那个时候是很重要的角色，而且对后来的影响也非常的大。那他们发生的事情跟夏瑞芳有没有什么关系？我相信这也是一个很重要的一个书写的一个重点。刚才我已经讲过，如果不是因为他的伟大的话，就不需要写这本书。那么他的伟大之处和历史上的位置，刚才几位专家学者已经讲了。在写作过程之中，我必须要凸显它，必须要彰显，这是这本书的一个核心内容。因为时间的关系，我不能多说，而且刚才几位专家都已经说过了。如果想知道它如何的伟大，那里有书，大家再继续看。下面我要讲的就是传记文学的特点。我们把它列为，如果把它硬要归纳成哪一种文体的话，把它归纳为传记文学。传记文学跟写新闻一样，跟这个纪实文学一样，是5个 W 1个 H。Who, why, when, where, what, how， 这是一个6大的主轴。也就是说，传记文学必须是字字有本，句句有依据。作者写出的文字必须有历史的真实性，它不是小说，不能够天马行空的去创造，也不能够去揣测，也不能够去捏造，也不能去细说，它不是戏剧，也不是小说。因此，它这个查证的过程，以及再三的这个斟酌，是写作的时候，我遇到非常繁复的一个功课。因为时间上不能错误，跟他有关的人不能错误，他所做的事，他所说的话，而且他记录已经很少了，因此找到的时候要怎么样来这个印证它，或者来查证它，这要花一点时间。其次我要谈到就是当初跟 Julian 他们谈的时候，说这本书希望能给海外的青年朋友也看。那么因此在这个笔调上呢，我就个人就力求轻松易懂，然后在这个枯燥而单调的历史的这个素材上面，发挥文学性的一个美感，增加它的可读性。那是不是有美感，是不是有可读性，也希望你能够看看这本书，由您来评价。在写作的过程里头，因为那个时代跟现在不一样了，因此我本人就刻意的体现出清末民初的一个氛围。在写作的时候，我制造那个时代的一种特色，也就是我们现在找不到的一种文化的一个气氛、文化的气息。那么那个时代里头，张元济、蔡元培等人的他们的外在的言谈和内心胸怀的气质，我觉得是非常重要的。大家可以看到他们那时候他们的怀抱、他们的眼光，
能够看得那么远，能够为中国未来的发展能够奠定这么的基础，有这么大的贡献，这完全是一种胸怀，完全是从内在发出来的。那么在今天来讲，说实在的，应该让更多的人去了解它，去感受它，而这个正是我们现在所看到我们周遭所欠缺的。时间的关系，我想我就讲到这里。那非常谢谢大家听我老王卖瓜，有不到的地方啊，请多多指教。真的，大家看书也请多多指教，尤其是各位专家，因为我相信有很多欠缺的。感谢主办单位给我这个机会，让我重新回忆写这本书的过程。我想这是一种重温旧梦吧。谢谢大家。谢谢。
I will give a very short, I hope it's succinct summary of what the author, Mr. Zhao, said. He said he came here as an audience, but he felt he was compelled to say a few things as an author. As an author, he found it particularly challenging as there was so little data about this Master Xia, who was assassinated 100 years ago at the age of 42, I believe. And he said, and because Master Xia emerged from obscurity, which I mentioned before, so he did not leave any writings of his own for his posterity to record or put it down in his biography. So it was a great challenge for Mr. Zhao to find everything, every word about him that was written, which were very few. So, and after he would dig up all these words, all the data, he had to make choice as to which word can be used, which fact could be trusted, because he said, Mr. Zhao emphasized the fact that biographical literature writing is quite different from regular writing, such as fiction or poetry or regular essays, because everything is based on facts. So who, when, why, how, where, feature most importantly in the writing. So he tried to achieve all these purposes. Whether or not he leaves it for the readers to decide. And also, he claimed that his admiration was paid to all the contemporaries of Master Xia Ruifang and all those who helped him, who had the same dream, same wish as Master Xia Ruifang. And then he thanks all of you. And then I add, this is the interpreter's note. Buy the book. Thank you so much. Sorry, my job is not done yet. You're not tired of me, are you? Are you? No. This old dog needs more patting, you know? I'm sorry. My co-chair says, hey, your job ain't done yet. You know, go on. So, you know, I always say, at all these events of Renwen, our subject matters are always very serious, about literature, about culture, about poetry, about all the worldly things in life. So there must be a comic relief, and that is where I come in, okay? Otherwise, everybody would just poetry is just too much history. So here I am. So have no fear. Ben is here. Provide you. I'm the comic relief of all the Roman events. Now, I need to introduce Mr. Julian Suez. Let him, I think he must explain as to why his last name is spelled S-U-E-Z-Z, Suez, which led me to think that he was at least Eurasian with a maybe Portuguese or Spanish father and with a Chinese mother. Yeah. No, really. Besides, this old brain is very dense, you know. So I asked the person who introduced us to each other, Miss Guin Tuan here. I said, is this person Eurasian? She said, no, he's Chinese. I said, where did you get the name Suez? She said, let him explain to you. So on lunch, and lo and behold, at lunch, I found this kindest and most wonderful, humble, exactly the opposite of me. Okay? Very quiet, elegant, refined, and generous. Generous, I cannot forget that. He's generous, I'm not just saying monetarily, but in spirit, in his kindness. You know, he is one person Blanche Dubois can depend on. Born and raised in Shanghai, Julian came to the United States in 1958 to pursue further advanced education. Mr. Julian Suez joined IBM Corporation after graduation from MIT. Mr. Suez worked in Hong Kong and was one of the first 10 to start IBM China in 1984 in Beijing. Mr. Suez is the only son of Mr. Ho Zofang's fifth daughter, Rhoda, the fifth daughter of Master夏瑞芳. Mr. Suez's mother, the fifth daughter of Master夏瑞芳, Rhoda, she was a graduate of Shanghai University. Julian's father, K.A.L. Suez, a graduate of University of Michigan, was an automotive engineer. Julian is one of the 7 surviving grandchildren of Mr. and Mrs. Xia Ruifang, or Zefang, though none of them carries the last name of Ho, Xia. They all consider themselves Xia grandchildren, holding their grandfather Xia Ruifang or Zefang in the highest esteem. Understandably, Julian is instrumental in bringing this biography on his grandfather and today's event into their joyous being. Now, without further ado, Mr. Julian Suez, 史继良.
Ben, thank you very much, and I have to get closer to the microphone. And with all the very academic and praises from the professors and from Dr. Wang and Mr. Wang, I feel very, very humbled to be standing here because I am going to disappoint you. I can't say anything too academic, but I'll say something that the others can't say because I'm going to tell you from a family perspective. From the family perspective. And I will start talking about, before I start talking about the family, I really want to start talking about how the book came about. And in the process, want to acknowledge some people along the way. And it was only 2 years ago, a good friend just threw out an idea, say, how about Renwen doing a symposium on your grandfather? I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. And how much do we know about grandfather? I can't tell you because my mother was only 8 years old when her father was gunned down. And 2 weeks later, I heard from Renwen. They said, yeah, we'd like to do a symposium, but in addition, would you like to have a book written? I said, that's even better. Now, I really want to say at this time, Diane, will you sow the seed of this idea of a symposium. And Renwen took it over, and the idea became a book. And I still thought it was impossible. And I thought the year 2014 is going to be a very important year. And that was 2 years ago, late spring. I think we had the first meeting, and we decided that can be done. And I want to thank the 3 giants of Renwen Society, and that's He Yong and Dr. Wang Ben. And Gwen. Would you stand up, Gwen? And Gwen said, why not? I said, 2 years. We have nothing to start with. He said, well, we've already identified a qualified author. And of course, that's Dr. Mack. And so we come up with a schedule to write in Chinese, to translate it to English. And then I said, all right, that's fine. How about the book to be published? And we contacted Commercial Press. And let me just talk a little bit about the process of the 2 years. And it was quite a bit of work from Dr. Mike to start with. And my Chinese is not all that good, so I must explain why my name is Suez. People think I'm a Hispanic. I was even asked, are you sure your name is not Julian Suarez? Well, Julian is my mother gave me because her mother was Julia. And Suez is anomaly. The Shanghai pronunciation of the family name is Si. And my grandfather was a diplomat. Si to the Westerners, it doesn't come out. And he used the Chinese have 名字 and 号. I don't know how to translate those things. But his how is. So he put those 3 words together. Si is, and became Suez. So from then on, I'm a Hispanic. And in this world, we always use emails, right? And so I have emails within the company. And by the time people see me, you're not Hispanic. And then they said, well, you must be from the Philippines. Nothing to do with the Philippines, but I do have a couple of nephews who were married to Philippines. Okay. All right, this is a family perspective. So aside from Diane, and aside from He Yong, Wang Ban, and Gwen, the big 3 in Renwen Society, and I might even add the only 3. Isn't that right? There's just the 3 of us doing everything. And then eventually, we said the book has to be published by Commercial Press. And that's where it's coming. And at that time, I didn't even know you. And Commercial Press was very accommodating. I said, well, the book has to be published bilingually in 1 volume. And the reason is, I have a couple cousins who can read Chinese, and their other cousins don't read Chinese. The rest of the family, another generation, they don't read Chinese. And Commercial Press was very accommodating to have the book half English and half in Chinese. And to some people probably it's, well, why the big fuss? But I think it's very important. It is really very selfish reason. But at the same time, I know that my grandfather, Wu Yuefang, now that's another controversial. Wu, that's the Shanghai pronunciation. And he's from Qingpu, or that comes closer to Tao, isn't it? And today I was very pleased to explain to Rex Tao. I've never met another person by the name of Tao. And here's another one. Of course, that's the Chinese characters are entirely different. Speaking of the family, I'm going to start with the first generation and then go on to the second generation. The first generation. Here they are. Grandfather, grandma. And this was, the photo was probably taken a year before he was assassinated. Because it was taken in the winter. I think it's taken in 1913. Because my youngest aunt, the one in the middle, sitting on the table, she was born in 1911, 1912. So I think, 1911, I think. Okay, so that was about 2 years old. And that was 1913 in the wintertime. That's the only photo of the whole family. My grandparents raised a family of 9. Uncle Bang, the oldest son, wearing a tie, and 8 sisters, younger sisters. And in 1914, lo and behold, on January 10th, he was gunned down, literally gunned down. At the time, Uncle Bang was 17, and my mother was 8, and my youngest aunt, Auntie Lu Ming, is only 2 years old. And here she's represented by, Auntie Lu Ming is represented by her daughter, Winnie, and Winnie's children. Winnie's not here, Winnie is in San Diego. Now, I want to talk about the 8 sisters and Uncle Bang. The 9 families, at the most, at one time we had 10 cousins, which cannot compare with my grandma. She bore 9 children in a span of 15 years. And, but we're very proud that even though none of us is Hao, but we all consider ourselves Hao cousins. And one thing that I remember, when Grandpa was assassinated, Grandma was advised not to look into that, who's behind it, who's behind the assassination, and why and what. Because she had a young family, and if she starts to do something, the family would get hurt more. And so therefore, growing up, I don't think the family really know too much. And to my generation, we know even less. And in the Cantonese, I was just thinking that. The Cantonese had this expression called mong cha cha. And I think growing up, I was just mong cha cha. What was it? Sound was always part of in the family. You go to school, you read textbook by sound squid. What's new? I mean, that's taken for granted. Okay, this is first and second generation, and I'm going to skip one generation, and I'm going to ask my nephew, Mikey, to come up. He's the 4th generation. He's my youngest aunt's grandson. Michael, would you come up? Yeah, I think it's the time. Oh. This is a very important picture because I came into the being in the world. Grandma is holding me. Right? And this is the time that all 8 sisters are in Shanghai. Michael, that's the most important person, right? And shortly thereafter, one of the aunts, Auntie Lubin, this one here, left Shanghai, came to the United States, and she had never gone back. And of course, she was represented by her daughter and son today here. Louis is this one here. And many people might recognize the name Julie Howe. This is Julie Howe. And I'll talk about that. All right, Mike, I'm going to ask you some questions now. Can you tell me why you call me Uncle Julian? Now, the reason why I ask that is because younger generations don't know really how people relate. Am I right? Well, I hope you said the right thing, Mike.
I am right, and
You're right.
I'm so pleased to be maybe the straight man to my Uncle Julian, who we really look up to so much. And, well, I call him Uncle Julian because that's how Chinese families do. He visits our family, he warms our life, and then through this family tree, we can trace how we're all related. And so for the family who are here, very much appreciate all the work that you all have done. But that's why I call you Uncle Julian, because you've been such a warm part of our family.
Well, but you still didn't tell the reason, the relationship though. I thought you might be able to explain.
Oh, the relationship.
Now,
well,
I mean, your maternal grandmother and my mother were sisters, right?
Absolutely, yes.
That's how it's very simple. But for the the next generation, it's very complicated. All right,
Yes.
so that's enough. Now, you're born in the United States
Yes, I am.
and total Chinese heritage, right?
Chinese heritage.
You have more Chinese name than mine. You're born in Seattle?
In Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin.
My sister was in Seattle.
I went to another study, and I didn't realize that you were still there when you were born. But I know that you've always been living on the West Coast. Now, you've never lived in China?
Never have lived in China. Visited many times, so that's been wonderful.
Okay. Can I ask a question if I offend you a bit? Do you speak some Chinese?
I'm afraid not. My mother, Shanghainese, Cantonese, very well spoken. My father from Khoisan. So growing up in Wisconsin, unfortunately, no
Okay.
Chinese.
Well, will it be offensive to say that you're ABC?
And I'm ABC. But very proud of that, because where else can you be an American but also have Chinese descent and be proud of those?
You're just marvelous. Tell me what you do.
Well, I work at a university, California State University, San Marcos, but I'm also the past and likely future president at some point of an organization called the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum. And it's a wonderful museum. I stand really on the shoulders of some of the leaders and the founders of that organization. So, I hope that there's some future connection between the museum and the learnings here.
You brought me to the museum, and I'm really, really impressed because we all know that San Francisco and New York are the places where a lot of immigrants, descendants live. But San Diego, we also have New York. Here are a number of Chinese immigrants. And the museum is one of them.
Thank you.
Now, tell me about your trip to China and why do you have some relation? You have some relationship. Got to understand where you are in the spring visiting.
I think it's wonderful you asked that question because that really is, I think, a nice tie-in between Chinese culture and the American culture. I had the opportunity to go with my wife and my 2 sons, 12 years old, participate in, for them, a 2-week language and culture program in Beijing. And they have a number of different programs, including field trips. So prior to that, my mother, Winnie Wong Chase, had given us the name of Zha Fang and in an email. And so we were going on one of the field trips to the National Printing Museum in Beijing. We're giving a very nice tour, and my wife had asked me, should we bring the email? And I said, no, probably not necessary. But sure enough, she is our family reporting artist, as well as a freelance photojournalist. She went ahead and did that, brought the email anyway. And as we're giving the tour, she pops it out, and she asks the curator who's giving the tour, do you know anything about this individual? And his eyes lit up, and he raced us over to an area of the museum. And to our surprise, there was an extensive exhibit about our great-grandfather. And so, including a large model of the printing complex, and so we have some family pictures, and I look forward to sharing it with any of you, as well as the family members who are here. And so the museum, they were very gracious. They were excited that we were there. We had an opportunity to go back, and some of the personal connections was this book that they shared with us. It is. Oh. And so we were very much actually, we don't know a whole lot about this book, and we'd like to understand a little bit more about what this textbook from maybe the 1920s has in store for us. And it's a very nice connection, because for those in the family who do not speak Chinese, this whole experience will really help connect us to our heritage.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Now I'm coming back to, this is the 4th generation, and I'm coming back to the 3rd generation, which is my generation. Now, what do we know about grandfather? Almost nothing. As you can tell, his mother was 8, and her father was gunned down. Uncle Bang has always played the role of the only male in the family, and he is the oldest son. And the family spirit has always been very close, with sisters always support each other under Uncle Bang. Now, growing up in Shanghai, in Grandma's, for a few years, I lived in Grandma's old house with Louis and a couple aunts. We never talked about grandfather. It's almost like talking about grandfather is so much like a taboo. Well, we all know that Grandpa was assassinated by bad man, Huai Ren. Like in the movie, you have a good man, you have a bad man. He was assassinated. Why? How? Nobody ever asked. Now, I also remember one thing. In the Grandma's house, there is the big living room, and we hate to go into the living room. Why? There are 2 pictures, Grandma's pictures hanging there. And to us kids, it was just scary. In fact, eerie, and then we don't want to go there. It's too formal, and early on there was the picture of the slide of the book and that portrait of my grandfather, if you all remember. That one, and along with my grandmother, that was enough to make us feel scary to get to go into the room. And other things that we remember are really of no, very little significance. Mother said, her father always worked very late. And they will come back. He will come back at night and with basketfuls of fruits so that the children have fruits in the morning. And that's something that my mother remembered. And I still remember that, what my mother told me. And another thing about my grandfather was that grandfather and grandmother were, especially grandmother, were highly religious. And then we go to church, we sing hymns, and grandma even played the old-fashioned pedal organ, which played hymnals. Grandfather, being a businessman, as my mother told me, will have season tickets or everyday tickets at the Chinese Opera House, Jingju. Well, the kids are not allowed to go to see the Jingju, even though the seats sometimes are not used, because they're supposed to be for business, entertainment. And my mother said, well, neither are we interested in that, because they're all brought up in the Western music. And those are the things that I remember about my grandfather. Now, here I am into the United States and got into IBM. And not until I worked in IBM for like 20 years. By now, I've been with IBM for 50 years now. Can you believe that? And at that time, I said, well, Gino, managing a big corporation is certainly not easy. Now, how did grandfather was able to bring a family print shop into a publishing house? It's unbelievable. Yeah, I'm beginning to understand the significance of grandfather's work in establishing commercial press. And that is just some recognition. Not until I read Gilman's book, I said, wow, I'm putting my grandfather into a historical perspective of cultural education. It really is amazing. And so therefore, only today I want to share with you some of my thoughts about my grandfather. My grandfather, Wu Zifang, was really a big contributor to China at the beginning, at the turn of the 20th century. In the education, cultural field, he is forever remembered as an entrepreneur and innovator. And he's, as other speakers have said, he has the talent, or he has the skill of recognizing the right people to work there. And Zhang Wenji, Tai Yuanpei, a lot of these names kept coming up back over and over again. And I'm beginning to understand that without these grand people working with my grandfather, commercial press would not be around here. And I think another thing that I thought was very important, my grandfather started humbly, downright dirt poor, if I might say so, from Qingpu, and to run away from his home to join his mother in Shanghai, who was a maid in a missionary couple's family. And then from that, he to start with a commercial press, a printing shop, and eventually built into a big printing enterprise. He leveraged foreign technology and foreign capital. And some people may not like to say that, but he did work with the Japanese and leverage that. But and very fortunately, at the time when he died, he bought back all the interest, and we all read about that. And this is also known for many writings by the different people. But unfortunately, he was killed right on that day that the newspaper announced that Shanghai commercial press interest was totally bought back by the Chinese from the Japanese. And what do I remember from my grandfather? I think we the third generation, had the opportunity with the support of Roman society and the big three and commercial press to bring about this book. And let's hope that the book will stay on and for the next generation to remember the starter of the family.
Thank you so much, Julian, for the fascinating family history of the pioneer, giant person, whole family. And I hate to make closing remarks, but I need to have to end this fascinating program today. First of all, I want to let people know the commercial press was established in 1897, and the CV Star East Asian Library at Columbia established in 1901 when the Li Hongzhang represented the Chinese government at the time decided to give a whole set of Chinese encyclopedia, 古今图书集成, to Columbia. So Columbia started receiving the sets in 1902. Then we started tried very systematically, comprehensively collecting Chinese materials. Of course, then we collect a lot of materials published by the commercial press. And our Chinese study librarian, Dr. Chen Zhi Wang, selected some. Can you say hi? Today's event, Dr. Chen Zhi Wang prepared a small exhibition. So we selected some of our early collections of commercial press publishing materials in our display in our library, and including some magazines mentioned by some speakers, 东方杂志, very early one, I think I looked, it's 光绪13年, something like that. So when you finish this here, if you want to stop by, our library is right on the way, and in the Ken Hall 300, and we have some special display case for all the early commercial press publishing materials from our collection. And take a look. And also our library is, again, it's a very old, a beautiful reading room, and even a lot of famous scholars relate to our library. Just, I think 3 months ago, I went to interview a scholar, some speaker mentioned it, Theodore DeBerry, Professor DeBerry. I asked him about, what did he know about our library? And then he just said one thing, he said, did you know Feng Yulan used to be a student work in the library with me? We both working for the Star East Asian Library. I said, oh, that's new to me. And so Feng Yulan is famous Chinese philosopher and teaching at Beijing University. So this is my closing remark. And do you want to say something?
I just want to let you know that the book that was published this year in Taiwan is sold out. And the commercial press in Taiwan is planning a second printing, but it may take some time. So if you want to get hold on the copy, and this is your only opportunity. We don't have too many copies, so Julian and Mr. Zhao will be signing the book, the copies of the book for you. And I think that there is a seal of夏瑞芳in the book that is very precious. The seal was created by a famous seal maker from Beijing, just for this purpose. Thank you very much. We welcome you to come more to the Roman events. Okay, there's the newest announcement. The Beijing commercial press is going to publish the book in simplified characters. So that project is taking place as we are speaking.